Hello everybody, and welcome to our talk on commissioning craftsmanship today, and welcome to Decorex. It's so lovely to see you all here in person. Thank you so much for coming along. I'm delighted to introduce our panel to you today. We have Kit Kemp, who is the founder and creative director of Firmdale Hotels and Kit Kemp Design Studio. Kit is a respected champion of British art and craft. She regularly commissions craft in her residential and commercial work. We have Sebastian Cox. Sebastian is a furniture maker and homeware designer who creates pieces with a nature-first perspective. Sebastian and his wife Brogan regularly collaborate on bespoke pieces for residential and commercial clients in their London studio and workshop. And I'm also delighted to introduce Flora to you. Flora Roberts is a decorative painter and designer who specializes in creating murals and decorative designs for walls in private residences and commercial interiors. She has also created fabric and wallpaper designs for several leading brands. So today we're all gathered to discuss the topic of commissioning craft in both residential and commercial projects and find out the benefits of using bespoke designs within projects and what makes for a successful collaboration. So I think it makes sense really to start and ask Kit, as a designer and an interior designer, doing all the things that you do, why do you often choose to commission craft rather than buy pieces that are already made by a designer?
Thank you. It's interesting because so often we say instead of designing an interior or designing a home, it's crafting a home, because we look upon the things that we do and the people that we're working with as craftspeople, and not only just the pieces that we commission, but the people that we work with, the carpenters, the curtain makers, the picture framers. They're all so important, and you know, we work as a team. There's not one person that can say they've done something. It's always a community, and there's that organic feel about craft, which is a skill which actually, to become a real craftsman, there's a repetitiveness to it. It's often running in generations. There'll be a grandfather to a father to a son to a daughter, and they might all be potters. And every piece of their work, no matter how often they might repeat it, because it's handmade, is always different. And it doesn't matter how many machines you have, you can never actually beat that loving feeling that you get from loving hands. It's all to do with your hands.
Okay, and tell us a little bit more about how you work with craft and makers.
Well, we can see on the screen here, this is just a little residential project that we did, but just within this little tablescape on top of a chest of drawers, what I'd like you to look at is the picture framing here. And Marcus Wells is our picture framer, and he can make the simplest piece of artwork into something really very, very special. And he's been honing his craft for about the last 25 years. And it's really exciting because when he comes in to see me, I'll say, I've got this piece of work and I don't know what to do with it. And he'll say, oh, we've just come across these old bits of plastic from old telephones, or I've just come across this old horseshoe, or there's a whole bag of buttons, let's do something here. And somehow he can create this wonderful artwork out of just sort of simple things around them. But also, just look, there's actually a Perspex lamp here, which is what we call the rocket lamp. And the rocket lamp is actually made out of Perspex. You don't always think about craft being anything other than woods or ceramics or cloth, but actually you can become a very skilled craftsperson. And here, this craftsperson is actually doing wonderful things with Perspex. Of course, here there's a fabulous sculpture, a pot, and then beautiful flowers. Right, so here we go. Is it going to work?
It looks like it would be the right clicker. It looks like it would be that, wouldn't it?
That one? Yeah.
No.
Well, it's not working.
No.
Could we go on to the next picture? Oh, right. So the next picture is of the work of Melissa White, who I often work with. And Melissa is rather like Flora.
Oh, wow.
She's a painter, and her first work was done for William Shakespeare's house.
Wow.
And she had to paint all the different walls and do the house. But she's very interested in folk art and the way that painters would have gone from house to house and created portraits or put paintings on the wall. Sorry about this. And there'll be a few blobs and blots and dashes, but it didn't really matter. It's that sort of handiwork. But here, in a very irregularly shaped room, which is very tall and very narrow, she's created, it's 22 feet high, a treescape, so that when you're in the room, you just feel as if you're surrounded by, in the tops of trees with birds, and it's just very romantic. But actually, at the moment, we're also, it's amazing because you can do something 22 feet tall, and now we're just creating, with Port Merion, who is a sort of pottery company, doing a whole dinner service, but with tall trees. So that should be interesting. And then also on the chair beneath is Hedgerow, which is another one of her hand-painted designs. But beside it, a very, very contemporary-looking metal table, which is a new design that we've put together. Next picture, please. Oh, can it work now? Okay, sorry, I'm a bit of a guinea pig. And here is the work. And of course, I love fabrics. And let's face it, we've been interested in cloth since Adam and Eve. And since those days when there were cold, chill winds that came into the room and we didn't want to cover ourselves with fur or skins, it's always been cloth. And here is an artist called Natasha Hulse, who she actually is a dress designer, but we've worked her across and enticed her to make headboards for us. And here it's collaged, it's painted, it's beaded, and it's just the most beautiful headboard. And you need very little around it when you've got that craftsmanship and work of a young artist here. The curtains are by Tobias and the Angel, and Angel has a shop in Barnes and teaches hand blocking. And she herself is a wonderful character and a wonderful spokesman for folk art. And on the bed, fine cell work cushions, which is working with prisoners, and it's teaching them a new craft. This is just cloth again. I mean, we've got weaves, we've got very contemporary large stripes, we've got embellishment there. But actually, the main thing in this picture is at the front, there's a coffee table, which is made by Tom Stogden, and it's made from slate and pieces of wood, and then put together in a very organic shape to create this coffee table. Next, this is Catherine Cuthbert. Catherine Cuthbert is a ceramicist and artist that we work with. She is a delight. And in our book, Design Secrets, we've introduced a whole chapter called Meet the Maker. And one of my favorites to go and visit and hear about a day in the life was Catherine Cuthbert. I don't think that any of our hotels have been complete without having some of Catherine's work. And here you can see her wonderful shaped vases on this extraordinary coffee table, on this extraordinary side table. And above it, the work of someone called Bard. And we thought it was appropriate because it's moving feet, it's people on the move, and which is what you do when you're in a hotel. But Catherine's work and her paintings are someone that you should really look up and enjoy their work, so please do. And here, this is actually just showcasing a lighting collection that we did for Porta Romana called Rockin' Robin. But what I really wanted you to look at was behind these incredible sort of sculptures behind, which are made out of walnut and also fabric. And it's the work of someone called Jerome Pereira and Sylvia Rules, and it's called Awari. And I think it's so fascinating the way that they've mixed this walnut and the textiles together to create this extraordinary. You could use it as a light. Now with LED, you can put LED inside it. I just like them as the wonderful sort of craftsmanship that it's showing there. And then we have here, it's we always love to have an old piece in a room, and somehow when you have an old crafted piece in a room, it pulls the whole thing together. And here is this wonderful Swedish cabinet which is standing in the background here, and the chairs themselves are old craftspeople from Argentina and also Peru, where they're making these rugs. So it's actually taking the craftsmanship and then putting them onto chairs themselves. And then finally, we've got pictures here of a residence that we have just completed in New York, and it's actually showcasing Sebastian's most wonderful table. And I went to Sebastian's workshop, and I think we hand chose this piece of oak on the top.
You spotted it in the back of the rack, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think when you're working for clients, it's merging two different people's points of views, if it's a man and wife. And the husband, you can see here, is very keen on sort of disco lighting and things. So we had to find this, we had to make this incredible chandelier and bring it from the Czech Republic. And then his wife loved the organic feel. So we had to kind of mix the two together and make it really fun and make it very young, because they were a young couple. But what we also did in the background between those two very large windows is add Martha Freud's pots. And Martha Freud is a wonderful ceramicist. And she works just in porcelain, and then we'll put little tiny pointillist spots. So we asked our clients to choose 18 wonderful places that meant something in their life. And then we got Martha to actually draw on the pots a little memory. So in fact, the house is a very special thing for them. And we're lucky enough to be able to customize like that. And on the table, another brilliant ceramicist called Daniel Reynolds. You can just see here the Tony Ducardo fireplace, and again, something that Sebastian made, sitting on this wonderful sort of sisal rug. And it's a coffee table made out of oak as well. And it just, you know, for a brand new house, really, it's only 8 years old, to actually add character into it, to actually be able to use and commission Sebastian to make something like this, what it does, it immediately gives a sort of grandeur to the house, but makes it sort of feel more relevant and not just a showcase. Anyway, thank you so much.
No, thank you. It's great to get an overview of some of the pieces that you've collaborated on and commissioned in your work. And I think it'd be really good to hear from some of the makers and craftsmen and women now. So I'd like to invite Flora to tell us more about her work and from her perspective.
Yes. Oh,
yes.
Thank you. Sorry, Kit. Thank you very much. So it's helpful if I just use my images as well. So should I do?
Oh, that was just another picture of
yes, lovely. So
the
lovely.
table.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Sorry.
Anyway, for me, it's often about when I'm working with an interior designer and a client, the starting point. So. For this one, this was a really old house, which the interior designer and the client wanted to make into a hotel. So we were thinking about the old house itself and having character in the work I did, which was a mural in this image. And it was really in a really ancient parkland. So we wanted the feeling of bringing the outside in. Oh, there seems to be one missing. But anyway, one of the interior designers sourced a lantern, which we put on the wall, and then I made a chain hanging from a branch, so it was quite fun incorporation of what was there. And then this one, I don't think you can quite see, but maybe you can. It was in a house in Devonshire where they had pargeting, which is a really early form of plasterwork, which is quite naive and wonderful. Sort of arts and crafts in feel, although it's much, much earlier. And this is me doing some trompe l'oeil So feeding off that reference. And then this was one from a recent project where it was about, the starting point was actually the outside of the house. So it had this really old wisteria, white wisteria. So I was bringing it in, and this was in a living room, so it was sort of relaxing space with a spacious design. And this one, the starting point was not so much the interior designer and the client, but one of the original owners, who was a lady on the fringes of the Bloomsbury set, who was particularly interested in the Italian Renaissance. And one of the interior designers I was working with, called Jane, she was on holiday in Rome, and she found this lovely gold motif on the Doge's palace there, which she brought back, and then we worked with it, and I incorporated it into this design. So when you walk into the house, you have this, and so hopefully that adds to the atmosphere of, you know, the lady who used to live there and everything. And then this, the starting point was the interior designer and the client were really interested by the idea of using a Dutch still life. So on the left, I've done a sample of the kind of feel that I thought they would be interested by. And then there was another room in the house where I thought maybe they could have an 18th century fragment of wallpaper, which I then made a bit more contemporary on the right-hand side. So we worked with those two things as a starting point. And then I worked off-site. So the Dutch still life, I found lots of different images, and I worked off-site to do some panels for this client, and she was a jewellery designer. And I wanted to work up, like they did, I guess, in the Renaissance, or anyway, and they used these really strong colours underneath and painted layers over the top, so you always had this feeling of luminescence. And for a jewellery designer, I thought that's near the completion, and those were going to be in panels, and they were in her workspace, so I thought it was quite fun, this idea of her being inspired by gem-like colours and making ruby necklaces or something. And then this was going back to the 18th century wallpaper I found. Again, I worked it up off-site into panels for her bedroom. And the wonderful thing is about working off-site, once you've agreed the parameters of what you're doing with the designers and the client, it's quite nice to actually have that space, both physically and psychologically, so that you can just sort of really get stuck in and lose yourself in the project. And that's all to be added, I think. And then sometimes you get clients who want to know exactly what's going to happen right from the very beginning, and that's fine too. It's a challenge, but it's quite interesting. So this was a ceiling design I did, which everything, even the tiny tendrils, ended up looking like that. So that was a different kind of challenge. And this again, I usually hand draw it. I use the computer sometimes, but I find with hand drawing, you're more able to get to the point quicker, I guess. It's just a better way of working. So that ended up looking exactly like that in a bedroom. And then this is a different style of working, which is just different. So the interior designer and client said, do what you like. And they said, we like these kind of colours. And it's a real privilege when you're given an opportunity like that. It's really wonderful. And so I was staying in this house, and I got to know them quite well. And I ended up using flowers from their garden and being quite spontaneous about it and bringing them into the mural, which was wonderful. And then the wallpaper design is really, that I do quite a lot at the moment, is informed by all this work. And it can become a commission, again, in the sense that the colours can be adapted and scales can be changed. And funny enough, coincidentally, I've got one here, which is coming out next year with Hamilton Weston, and this is called Peony Garden. But yeah, and then there's a painting. I'm working on some paintings, doing flowers from life at the moment. And I haven't yet taken on any commissions, but it has made me reflect on how important it is, the relationships, how that sort of affects what kind of craftsmanship you end up with, I guess. So, yeah.
Thank you, Flora. I've got lots of questions, I'm sure, from that, and I'm sure the audience have too. But let's now hear from Sebastian, and then we can talk about everything afterwards.
All right. Yeah. Cool. So, yes. Well, let's start in the woodland. My business is focused around trying to find a use for British wood, and the way that we try to do that is apply good design and excellent craftsmanship to otherwise kind of underappreciated materials. This is our woodland in Kent. It's about 4 acres. We manage it for biodiversity, and then we make products which either are sort of in small batches, or we work with clients and work on the sort of the commission process. This is our workshop in South East London, and as we mentioned a moment ago with Kit, it's really useful having a workshop in London, and that's sort of where this idea of commissioning often always starts. So I've thought many times about moving out and getting a bigger workshop in the countryside, but actually it is quite nice being near clients, and also our staff live locally, so it's a really nice place. We're down in Greenwich, so pop down or get in touch and we can arrange for you to come see us. But here is where we apply the craft that we've all learnt. We also have digital fabrication processes. So we sort of, although we are really interested in craft, in the traditional sense of the word, we're also interested in how we can test that in a modern sense too. We also have a sawmill, a number of sawmills actually, and this means that we can take that sort of collaborative relationship even further by using the client's own trees, which is really exciting. This is a house in the Cotswolds, and we're milling something like 15 trees there, and we're going to end up doing a lot of interior joinery, because a tree yields quite a lot of wood. So it'll be things like dining tables through to kitchens. This is a great one. And what I love about the mill is that it unlocks a relationship which unfolds over 2 or 3 years, because from when you mill the tree, you've then got to wait for it to dry. And there's no way of hurrying that. Well, there is, you can kiln it, but it's less good if you do that. So it really makes for a longer connection and a really nice relationship. This is just a sort of snapshot of some of our work recently. This was shown at Cavendish House during the London Design Festival. This is a bed from our Bay Leaf collection, and a desk and a chair from our Products of Silviculture collection, which is more of a kind of, product line, whereas the Bay Leaf is more customizable, the bed is more customizable, and the mirror too on the wall. These are recent products that we launched. This is a leather lounge chair and magazine rack next to our shake cabinet, which is an older piece, but I always show that because it's kind of ended up being shown absolutely everywhere. So people see that piece and they know who we are often. And again, we develop products all the time and launch products, but ultimately they don't necessarily sell as products per se. They become the beginnings of a conversation around a starting point. So if you come down to our workshop, you'll see lots of things, and that's a really good way of opening up those conversations around commissions. That's our Products of Silviculture collection again. And actually I like this little collection because the chair and the desk are made from wood from our woodland, and the lamp above is made of mycelium. We grow those lights from mushrooms in our lab and workshop in London, and we're just undertaking, again, we launched that as a product and they retail for sort of £300, and we're just doing a light for a restaurant in New York, which is kind of 3 metre by 5 metre installation, all made from these grown mushroom elements. We do a lot of residential work as well, and it's really important in that sort of one of the things that we're really keen on is making sure that we build that connection with the client or the interior designer or the architect to understand where we're coming from as a studio. So it's not just about saying, here's a joinery package, off you go, submit your price. It's about understanding the parameters of working with British wood. In the UK, we import 90% of the wood that we use here. The only country in the world that imports more wood than the UK is China. And that's not per capita, that's by volume. We're a massive importer of wood. So in order to work with what we have growing here, we have to sort of change the arrangement for the interior to get a more meaningful interior, but one that still sort of hits that sweet spot of looking amazing and functioning well. So the example here is that the client approached us and they wanted a walnut kitchen. And we kind of said, well, walnut's not a very big tree and doesn't grow here in any abundance at all. Why do you want walnut? And they talked us through why they like the material. And so we ended up breaking it down and saying, well, we've got this tree, it's only 1.4 metres tall, the log, and it's quite expensive and there's this much. So why don't we do the drawers and the doors of this amazing cabinet that fills the centre of the room and frame it in ash, which is abundant and inexpensive, and then we'll do the run in ash as well. And they absolutely loved it, and it almost meant more because we'd had that conversation, built that relationship around the problem, and ended up with something which was, I think, a much better result. So yeah, that's an English walnut, an ash cabinet, and an ash kitchen. We also undertake, contract work and sort of build relationships with bigger organisations. So this is the headquarters of the Crafts Council. And again, this was, working with AOC architects. And this was a really nice commission because it wasn't just, as I say, it wasn't just here's a joinery package, off you go. It was, we'd like you to do the joinery. What can we do that works within, certain parameters like budget, for example. So the furniture in here is made from ash trees that have been felled due to ash dieback. So it's a very inexpensive material and helps us kind of, hit those budgets when you're talking about institutions like the Crafts Council, where it's, money that's precious. We try to work resourcefully around that, and material can be a good way to do that. But you really need a client who's on board with that. So again, that thing about trust and relationships is really important. One of the things that I love about what we do is that because we focus on this kind of looking at working with British wood, it means that we end up making all sorts of interesting things because that's our only parameter. So someone approached us and said, can you make me a tree house? And I said, yeah. And this is what we ended up with, which was like one of our really fun commissions from last year. I think that's it. Oh, yes, that is it. We're back to Jim. There we go.
Oh, thank you. I think one of the things that I'm hearing is that communication is vital to collaborating on all of these levels. So I wondered if you could expand for me a little bit on what really works well in this process of commissioning craft from both perspectives, really.
Well, strangely, I find the bigger the group of interior designers are, the more focused. I don't know why this is, but when it's one interior designer and one, obviously one client, you know that the client has come to the interior designer because they share the same sensibility, so that's a given. But for some reason, I don't know, it's as if you've got so many options, whereas if it's a big group, there's less, you know that there's going to be more time to go through everything, but for some reason it makes everyone more focused. And it's not so much that it's a problem when you've got more people, but it's less people. But it's just time. Time is the only thing that I guess determines, when I just come down to it, the price of something. so it's that's my initial response to what you just said.
No, that makes absolute sense. Do you think because there's a bigger group, you have to condense into something much simpler, so that you're sort of trying to explain to a lot of people?
Yeah, I think it's that.
Perhaps.
It's really interesting. Yeah.
And I don't know, Kit, Sebastian, are there any ways or ways of communicating that you find work particularly well to facilitate a strong dialogue? Reference materials or images. What sort of helps translate ideas into storytelling in a way that works in this kind of collaboration?
Well, I think that first of all, you decide who you're going to use. You must love their work and love Flora's work, love Sebastian's work. But what I don't think you should do with a really wonderful artist and craftsperson is to put them in an arm lock. And because really what you're trying to do is get the best from everybody. And that does mean that it is a dialogue. And so often we're trying to create in a room a sort of focal point. It's like a sort of decoy focal point which will say so much about the person that's living in that room, rather like the walnut, rather like your client, as you come in the house, there's that wonderful Italian feel. So that's what we're trying to assess. So it's getting the right person, but then saying it's an organic sort of thought process. So the original idea might not be actually what you get at the end. Hopefully at the end it's much better than the original idea.
Yes, that makes sense.
For us it's very much about the process and the material. So it's quite hard to have those conversations without a face-to-face meeting. And also, I don't know about you guys, but I'm absolutely sick of Zoom. So, it really, now we can do it, meeting in person, either going to the client's house with a sample set and, meeting the designer there as well. Or, like I say, I suppose, Flora, with your work, if it's site-specific mostly, you're probably less focused around getting them to your studio. But for me, that is the really, really important part of it, because it does open those. And actually, where our studios are, there's like 500 other artists. So we often lose the designer off into the complex
that's
somewhere
nice.
after the meeting anyway. So it's always fruitful. But yeah, I think that personal thing is so important.
Yes, absolutely. And Kit, for designers in the audience who may not have commissioned craft before, what would your advice be to them?
I think it's actually all about your client. It might be at the end of the day that you're not so keen on sort of filigreed sort of ceramics or something like that. But if it's something that says so much about the person you're working for, there's always a way of making it work for everybody. And I think that's what makes a really excellent interior designer. It's having something that makes you want to sort of look more. It makes you want to be curious, to go into that next space, to see what's going on around the corner. And you can do that by using colour very cleverly. But very often it's actually having some kind of creativity, some kind of skill, some kind of artisan skills that suddenly can be brought to the fore. Maybe someone that you've never heard of before, but actually a working relationship will suddenly it will give you just that little spark of an idea that makes you think about things differently. And I think that's hopefully what commissioning, people is all about.
Yeah. And Flora and Sebastian, from your perspectives, how do you like to be approached by designers, or what advice would you give to them from the other side?
Well, I mean, if I'm being really honest, I mean, the kind of elephant in the room around this conversation around craft is price, isn't it? Because ultimately you can get things that serve a nice function and look good in a space that don't cost a lot of money. So actually a conversation around budget up front is really helpful because we can totally know where you're aiming at as a designer or a client. And there's that thing with I know that sometimes if I'm getting some work done on my house or whatever, I'm reluctant to tell the builder how much I've got, obviously. But the reality is that most people who make things and do things with their hands, then they just take your figure and then divide it by their hourly rate, and that'll tell. It's like, then it's just like, oh, how long have I got? There's no like massive margin or any of those sorts of things when you're commissioning craft. You're really just paying for the person's time. So, and often actually, I don't know about you, but I sometimes feel like I'm paying the client to make the work for them. Sometimes, you get to the end of the project and you spend an extra 100 hours or whatever. So I think that's really important, and but that does come down to trust, doesn't it? And that's where the interior designer or architect is in the middle and kind of can say, we've worked with these people before, they're really good, you'll get really good value for money.
I think the trust thing, and also it's really wonderful when you work with an interior designer like yourself who's really imaginative. So you're in part of that kind of ride, and you're contributing to it, and they involve you, and it's wonderful, really, I think. So
I would also say nice and early in the process too. I don't know if you find this, Kit, but sometimes, like I find with interior designers, if we're quite early to the table and there's a sort of a commitment to say, look, we've got this project, and actually we think there's something there that you might be able to work on, but we don't quite know what yet. Rather than just approaching at the end with the brief, and then you sort of say, oh, well, maybe this would have been better, or whatever it is. So I think that sort of early open conversation, if it's appropriate, that always works well with us anyway, because we can say, oh, actually, maybe we're not the right people for that, but have you thought about solid sycamore skirting boards or something, left field. So, early on.
And
it is about
scale.
It is about scale and balance, though.
Yes.
And so often with what we're doing, we're actually working from plans because the building isn't actually there. But you know that you've got a space which might be in a basement, which has no windows, which might be looking like sitting at the bottom of a cardboard box. So you know that scale-wise you've got to do something which is mighty. And so you can come very early on and talk about size and scale.
That sounds good. And I don't want to talk about the audience like you're not here. So let's see if we have any questions from the audience at this stage for our panel. Anyone? Hello.
Sebastian, I'm intrigued by your wood. How did you acquire a wood? And if you didn't have that asset, would it restrict the amount of work you can produce that you're producing, your craftsmanship from this country, the UK?
Great question. So it's only 4 acres, so it provides only probably about 5 or 10% of what we do. what I should have said in the talk is that it sort of acts as a proxy for our understanding of the rest of the British wood situation, so to speak. So, it's an unmanaged, overstood, ancient, semi-natural ancient woodland, which is what much of the broadleaf woodland of the UK is. So it helps us understand, and then in terms of the scalability of it, we work with sawmills who are sourcing from woods very much like ours. And how I acquired it, it's my dad's farm.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to chip in with one from me then, if that's the case. That's absolutely fine. So, Kit, as a champion of British craft, do you feel a certain responsibility with what you do to also commission bespoke pieces to keep British craft thriving and that our kind of heritage alive in some way?
No, not at all. There's so many fabulous makers and skilled people out there that, I feel it's a privilege to be able to ask them, actually. And I'm always trying to find more people, because actually what does happen is that I use someone and then they become so popular I can't afford to use them again.
Yeah,
So
I bet. Yeah.
it's a constant search.
How do you
Sorry.
discover new people to commission? Where do you find them?
All over the place. I mean, really, that's so difficult. Because, I mean, it's just wherever I go, I'm always seeing something that's new or different, and just being overly nosy and rather curious, I think, and just trying to look behind things.
Yeah.
But what we're doing is such a visual thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone thought of a question? Any questions? Oh, yes, we do.
Sorry, I was just wondered the name of that lady who did pottery in one of your projects. Martha?
Oh, Martha Freud.
Freud.
Yeah, Martha Freud, F-R-E-U-D.
Thank you.
It's quite a famous surname, actually.
Thank you.
Yeah, must be a relative.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Yeah.
I think there was a hand over here somewhere.
Hello, it's a quick question. I'm just wondering where you see the future of craft in Britain, particularly in this day and age. Sourcing locally, obviously, is everyone's thinking more about reducing the air miles and what have you. So I'm just wondering how you feel about craft in the UK and where that's going.
That's a good question.
Craft in the UK and
Yes, where do we
going.
see the future of it? Yeah.
Well, that's a really big question. I wasn't expecting that one. I think that we're sort of on an age now where people are really starting to question where things come from. I know you referenced air miles, etc. I think the pandemic has made people look to home a lot more in where they travel and maybe where they eat. And I think that'll certainly continue to have an effect on what people are buying. And there's also the sort of environmental responsibility side of things, that connection with knowing where things come from. And that's something which we really, actively are trying to discuss and talk about. So I think I'm very optimistic about the future of British craft. I think we need to rebuild manufacturing in this country in many different ways. And one of the ways will be more likely that kind of like higher value, lower volume model of business rather than, opening up mass manufacturing factories. So I think it's got a very healthy outlook. I appreciate Kit's comments about not feeling like you were being charitable with British craft. I think it does, however, rely on people still investing in it and commissioning the works. So yeah, I think we're in a good place with it, and I think that the next century is going to be really good, because I think people are quite sick of the sort of digital world and the consuming of things, in that sort of third-party way. I think that people are seeing the value in the handmade. I think we're, this is a replica of the arts and crafts movement of the late Victorian era that we're in at the moment. And I think we're in a good place. I think William Morris would be looking down, fairly happy with what's going on.
I would have thought
Anything
it's
to
quite fashionable, actually, which helps, doesn't it? So, but I'm quite biased because I've got something to do with something called the Art Workers Guild, which is a wonderful institution, which is London-based, but it's UK-wide, and it's promoting all sorts of craftspeople and makers and whatever people want to call themselves, artists and designers. So there's places like that which I think raise the profile of of all this. So it's
And
great.
Quest, Q-E-S-T.
Oh, Quest, yeah.
That's
Yes,
also another
yes.
very good one as
Yeah.
well, to find people. But I think sort of workshops, people are loving to do workshops. They all want to learn something new. I think the wonderful thing also about craft is you can come to it at any time in your life. You don't have to be a youngster. You can be an oldster, and a very oldster sometimes. You can suddenly find your métier at about the age of 60, maybe with wool work, maybe with ceramics, and that's a wonderful thing. But I think there's a lot of creativity in the home, and that's what we found in the pandemic, how much creativity was going on.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I think that's all we've got time for, but thank you so much to our panellists, and thank you everybody for coming and listening. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you.